Hello again. One of the perennial complaints among black parents in Britain is that their children do not see themselves represented at school. That is to say that most staff are white, most of the history they learn is about white people, and the majority of other pupils are not black. This, it is claimed, is the chief reason for the chronic underachievement of black pupils in Britain's educational system. In the United States, some of those who devised and champion now the idea of critical race theory have said that there is a case to be made for schools which are only for black pupils. This would, it is claimed, do away with all the awful effects of systemic racism in the educational system and allow black children to soar up and achieve their true potential. The idea has been tried several times though, and it never does seem to benefit the children. Quite the opposite, in fact, because the educational standard at such schools tends to be far worse than that at the other schools in the area, and the result is black children leaving school with even worse qualifications than they would have if they'd been sent to ordinary schools. A good example of this was the John Loughborough School in Tottenham, a mainly black area of London. The school was set up in the early 1980s by members of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. From the beginning it was intended to give a Christian education for black children. It wasn't far from where I was living in Tottenham in the 1990s, and I also knew some of the children attending the place. They came round to my house for tea on occasion. In this way I was able to learn something about John Loughborough, get a kind of inside view of it, as you might say. I might mention that some of those kids that I knew then were so disillusioned with the education which they received there that they're currently planning to home educate their own children when they reach the age of 5. I'm still in touch with some of them because of course home education is something I really might be able to help with. The main problem with John Loughborough is that it was run in the same way that I've known shops run by black people to be run. Viewers might have noticed that although they will often find that local newsagents and convenience stores are run by Indians and Pakistanis, none are run by black people. Apart from one or two specialist shops in places like Brixton, there are no small shops owned and run by black people in this country. Has anybody ever asked themselves why this should be? I've known one or two start up, but they simply do not last. What typically happens is that there is not enough attention to forward planning, by which I mean what will happen when the VAT bill falls due, say, in a year's time, and that kind of thing. So the first lot of tax bills that come in, usually there's not enough to pay for the things, and the business goes belly up. I've known one or two Gujarati shopkeepers fairly well, and for them it was a full-time job, almost 24 hours a day. Even when the shop closed in the evening, they would retreat to the flat above the shop and then start tackling tax returns and so on. They seemed to regard running a shop more as a vacation, whereas the black people that I've known tended to be fairly okay at running the place, but then neglected all the paperwork and financial planning, which keeps an enterprise of that kind afloat in the long term. I draw no general conclusion from this, it is simply what I have observed. This was the downfall of the John Loughborough School, in that there's a lot of paperwork which must be kept up to date and reports to write and so on. None of this would have affected the education the kids were receiving, of course. The harm there was done by another habit to which a lot of black people seem rather prone, which was allowing various relatives and friends to help out. These people would be used at the school to cover for qualified staff who were absent for some reason. It was soon noticed that using somebody's aunt to run a class was a lot cheaper than paying the salary of a qualified teacher. The thing was, though, that Cousin Mina might have been great at telling Bible stories and playing the piano when the kids sang a hymn, but she wasn't so hot when it came to teaching long division or percentages. This business of getting relatives to stand in is often seen in care homes and so on, where they're expecting one Nigerian to turn up for night shift and lo and behold, a cousin or sister turns up instead. I need hardly mention that this causes headaches from a safeguarding point of view. In the end, Haringey Council had to step in and close down the school, which inevitably led to accusations of racism, but by that time the standard of education there was appalling. I found it fascinating to see how John Loughborough followed the same pattern that I've seen with shops run by Caribbeans, which folded up after a while. There might be something worth examining about this phenomenon. Forward planning is something that those from South Asia seem almost to have baked into their DNA, but for Africans and Caribbeans it appears to be more of an optional extra. That might be cultural, it might be another thing, I really don't know. In the description to this video I give a few links to some information about John Loughborough School for those that want to read about it.